All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's Bible study. And glad you guys could join us tonight. It is Wednesday Night Live. It's been a little while since we've been here. Sorry for maybe the funny lighting or camera angle. Right before we started, our HDMI camera angle went out, and so we're going with our computer camera angle. So once again, if I look here up above your camera, it's because I'm so used to looking at that camera rather than here at that camera. I apologize, but it's good to have the Millers, the Harts here as well. Cassie with us, Kelly's. I see Eric there on Facebook. So if you're with us, Kristen now on Facebook as well. Glad you could join us. And as always, it is so imperative for you to join in the conversation, especially tonight, because I know we got a few people out of town. Like I know the Bill and Anita are out of town. A few others may not be able to make it to computer for a few reasons tonight. And so if you are on here, we want you to jump in. I will admit, as we transition to a new book, there's going to be some upfront just kind of laying the groundwork, but there are some questions we still want you to be involved in, and we look forward to it. Good to have the Claytons on here as well. George, it's good to have you here as well. Once you know, we've been praying for you. We let the church know on Sunday about your mom, and I know many of them have been praying for you as well. And obviously, our heartfelt condolences go out to you and to your family during this very, very difficult time, I'm sure. But I know that you're excited to know that your mom isn't physically dealing with the pain here anymore. It looks like we're having some trouble possibly on Facebook video. If that is the case, somebody let me know. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I'm seeing. It's telling me that they're having trouble playing our video on Facebook. I don't know if that's the case or not. I'm going to see if I can maybe change this angle just a little bit. But if you are on Facebook, let me know, because that's what it's saying. I'm going to ask on Facebook here. Okay, so Facebook says good. Must be my computer. Good. Glad to know that. So I'll just move on and ignore that. And if anything changes, let me know. I appreciate you guys getting back to me so quickly. That is good to hear. All right, let's move on tonight and jump into some of our fun segments. We're going to jump in right to the fact of the day. And if you weren't with us the last time we met, we've changed up a few of our segments. We kept a couple of them the same, but we've changed up a few of them as well. Today's new fact of the day may or may not be of interest to you, but I thought it was kind of interesting. And that is this. Did you know that Venus is the only planet in our solar system that spins backwards? Although, if you're Venetian, is that what you call it, if you're from Venus? Or if you're Venus, maybe you feel like all the other planets spin backwards and you're the only planet that spins in the right direction. I don't know. How do you think about that? What do you think about that? I know there's people out there that are smarter than I am. Does anybody know why Venus spins the opposite direction from everybody else? I say from everybody else as if they're personalities or people. From all of the other planets, why Venus rotates in the other direction? I don't know. George says he remembers a hint of that. I do too. I remember hearing something about that when I was growing up and studying the solar system, that kind of stuff. But thought it was interesting when I ran across it against it this week again, that Venus is the only planet in our solar system that spins backwards. If you know why, let us know. It'd be interesting to know why, or at least theories as to why Venus is the only planet in our solar system that spins backwards. Let us know. All right. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't know that, but there you go. Again, one day if maybe somebody's on Jeopardy and the category solar systems and this one comes up, you'll know it, and you can thank me for it, because Fred Clayton says because God has a sense of humor. It's very true. That could very, very well be the case. All right, on to the question of the day. All right, question of the day. I want you to answer it. There is no wrong or right answer. There's just your answer. And it's a way for us to find out a little bit about each other. And so let me know. It could be anything. I mean, anything. Anything. Okay, as Ryan mentions, maybe reverse magnetic field. That's way above my pay grade or my abilities to think. So that may be the way it is. Katie mentions that maybe God did it that way just to show how powerful He is. There's no doubt about that. He's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna spin all of them this way. I'm gonna take you and spin you this way because I can. Here's the question of the day. I'd love to know about this from you. It's a very simple question. Right here it is. What is your favorite thing to do at home? Right? You get home and it's like, man, I'm so looking forward to this. And it can be anything. All right? You don't have to, you know, you do away with all the, you know, all the platitudes and all the other things. What's your favorite thing to do at home? Some people may just be, man, I just love to sleep at home because, it's my bed and I love to take a nap at home, or I love to read at home, or I have a specific spot I like to go hang out at home, or, I like, what is your favorite thing when you get home? Let's maybe think about it this way. Maybe you've been gone, like on vacation or something, or you've been out of town or for work for a week and you're coming home and you're like, man, I can't wait to do this. What is the this? What is your favorite thing to do at home? So, George has already chimed in and said his favorite thing to do at home is spend time with family. And I think that's probably pretty high up there. As a matter of fact, most of us would probably put that as number one, spending time with family. Let me maybe put it this way. What is your favorite thing to do with your family? All right, Fred says work in the field, and I know there's a lot of people that are that way as well. They just like to come home and put some work in and maybe some project that they've been working in. Some guys like to go to the garage and work on a project that they're working on. Katie says she likes to relax and cuddle on the couch and watch a movie with Azariah. So, yep, that's always something fun to do. Favorite thing to do at home? Let us know. Cassie says sleep. The only place that she sleeps well. It's true. And I'm not just saying this about her. I'm saying this about me as well. Especially as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to sleep well at other places. Your bed is like the most comfortable place. Like there's no bed like your own bed. No pillow like your own pillow. My son Gabe says he enjoys playing video games online with his friends, and so that's something that he enjoys doing at home. Again, if you're on here, we know we got a couple eyes with us on Facebook, a couple eyes on us here with on YouTube. What is your favorite thing to do at home? And think about things maybe that you can't do or don't do well at other places, and let me know what you think. What's your favorite thing to do at home? I'll wait for those answers. Let's see here. We got a couple other ones coming in. The Clayton's mentioned play and work with and watch the animals. That is a lot of fun. Eric says watch TV in the recliner, right? Just chilling out in the recliner, or then working on the truck, right? It's always tinkering in the garage with the truck. It's a little project there on the truck, so that looks like, I'm sure that's a lot of fun. All right, if you have an answer, let me know. We're going to move on to the joke of the day. That is right, the joke of the day. No, Daniel did not put me up to this, although it probably has become his favorite segment, even though it's only the second time we've done it. And I'm sure he already has, but he will continue to send jokes that he wishes or wants us to put in this segment, and probably we won't put any of them in there. So I'm looking at some other answers here. Josiah says same as Gabe, likes playing video games online with his friends. George mentioned story time with the babies and Amy. Fun things to do at home. Wonderful things we can thank the Lord for even today. Be sure to do that. Here is today's joke of the day. I bet some of you have heard this before. I bet some of you already know the answer. But let's see if we can get the first one to get the answer. Ready? Here we go. And don't be too grossed out by the picture. The hearts talk about going on walks with the family, and we enjoy doing that. Especially, I'm sure most of us noticed. I think it was Monday night. It was a really, really hot day, and then all of a sudden in the evening, the temperature just plummeted, and it's like, oh, let's go out for a walk. Oh, it's gonna feel so good. In the past couple days, especially for me, I've been walking around the block in the morning and the evening because it loosens up my legs and my hip and all of that stuff that's been hurting. And so, in the early morning hours or late evening hours, and it feels really, really good. Here's today's joke of the day. Ready? Here we go. What do you call a cow with 2 legs? All right, who's the first one that can answer? What do you call a cow with 2 legs? Katie's saying she took one of those nice cool walks today. I did as well. I'll probably take one when I'm done with this tonight. By that point, it should be cool outside again. Really, really cool outside again. I know it sounds funny, but my body's been in one position all night, and so I need to loosen up my back and my hip and all that kind of stuff in the morning. And then I actually try to do it right before I go to bed, so it's nice and loose too, and hasn't been like all in one place for a while. Anyway, Katie says kangaroo. That's what it looks like. That is true. Daniel says utter disappointment. No, it's a good guess though. Tucker's utter disappointment. I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, that looks like a kangaroo, but it is not a kangaroo. What do you call a cow with 2 legs? Ready? Here we go. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to guess. No looking it up on YouTube, on Google. Ready? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is lean beef. Get it? Lean. He's got 2 legs. He's gonna be lean. He's leaning forward or leaning to the side because he's only got 2 legs. Lean beef is what you call a cow with 2 legs. That's right. Fred Clayton says dinner. That is true as well. I'm sure he'd make some good steaks there, some good sirloins or something. All right, very funny. Josiah is blowing up our Facebook. I'll show it though. Josiah's, I mean, not our Facebook, our YouTube comments there with all of his laughing emojis. But when I read that today, I thought it was pretty funny. You can use it on your friends, coworkers, relatives, neighbors, worst enemies, whoever you want to. You can use it tomorrow if you need to get a laugh. What do you call a cow with 2 legs? Lean beef. I don't think that's the medication laughing. I think that's a funny joke. Josiah thinks it's a funny joke too, so we'll leave it at that. Anyway, we are. Come on, you people are killing me. Good. Daniel said it moved him to laughter. All right, here we go. Our study tonight is going to, and it's going to be a multi-week study in the book of Ruth. And Fred Clayton, or one of the Claytons, asked what do you call a cow with no legs. I've heard a lot of these before. But go ahead and write the answer in there if you want to answer. That's on Facebook. We're going to begin a study in the book of Ruth, and it's going to be a multi-week study. And as I said when we started tonight's study through the book of Ruth is going to be a lot of kind of upfront laying of the groundwork, but we will get into some of the first chapter, and there will be some questions I want you to think about and to consider, and so hang with me, because I am going to ask you some questions that I want your mind to think about. I want you to consider. Maybe you're really familiar with the book of Ruth. Maybe you're only somewhat familiar with the book of Ruth. Maybe you don't know a whole lot about the book of Ruth at all. And I hope our time through the book of Ruth can be really, really helpful for you. And what I want to do to start, as I often do, to lay some of the groundwork, is I want to share with you, first of all, the 3 main characters in the book of Ruth. And these are real people. And I refer to them as characters, players, but they're real people. 3 main people in the book of Ruth, and there are more. We'll see that there are more than just 3 people. But I want us to look at the 3 main people in the book of Ruth. And the first one is a woman by the name of Naomi. And as we'll see in just a little bit, Naomi was married to a man named Elimelech. And Elimelech was a man from Bethlehem, Judah, and that's important for us to know. He was an Israelite from Bethlehem, and that is going to be really important for us to know. Naomi and Elimelech had 2 sons, and their sons were Mahlon and Chilion. And Mahlon and Chilion, once they got older, they each got married and they had a wife. Each one of them had a wife. One of them's name was Orpah, and the other one's name was Ruth. Okay, so while we're talking about Naomi, Naomi is married to Elimelech. Naomi and Elimelech have two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Mahlon and Chilion marry women. One's name is Orpah, the other one's name is Ruth, who is the namesake of this book. Now, just as a side note, just extra trivia for tonight, many of you probably know this, but Orpah is actually spelled O-R-P-A-H. And we have a really famous person in the world, in America, who's actually named after this person. Oprah Winfrey's parents, when they put her name on her birth certificate, they meant to put Orpah, but they misspelled it as Oprah, O-P-R-A-H instead of O-R-P-A-H, and that name stuck. It was on her birth certificate, and therefore it became her name. And she is, while her parents actually meant to name her Orpah, she actually became Oprah, and is now one of the most probably famous names, certainly in America, if not in the world. So Naomi, though, is the first main player in the book of Ruth. The second one would be Ruth. Ruth is daughter-in-law to Naomi. And we're going to see here in just a little bit that her husband passes away and Ruth becomes a widow. Okay? And so we have Naomi, and then we have Ruth, who's her daughter-in-law, and Ruth's husband passes away. She's a widow. And Naomi's husband passes away. She becomes a widow. Orpah's husband passes away. She becomes a widow. And this is kind of the whole groundwork for the book of Ruth. Then there's a third major player, and that is a man by the name of Boaz. Okay? And Boaz is a prosperous farmer who is down the line related to Elimelech and begins to take interest in Ruth. We also find out throughout history that Boaz is a direct descendant, or actually a direct ancestor of Jesus. Basically, Boaz has a son, and that son's name is Obed. And Obed has a son, and that son's name is Jesse. And then Jesse has a son, and that son's name is David, King David. So basically, Boaz is David's great-grandfather. And so these are the three main players in the book of Ruth: Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. They're going to play a huge part in the story as we go through the book of Ruth. Now, there are also some really, really important terms and ideas that are important for us to know when we study the book of Ruth. And sometimes we've seen this before, but especially in the Hebrew language, there are words that hold such deep and important meaning and varied meaning that sometimes it's hard, really difficult to translate it into English and get the same gumption in the word. The first one, and a really important one, is the word chesed. That's the way you say it in Hebrew. You kind of almost like you're hawking something up from the back of your throat. Chesed. Okay? And that word chesed means, is translated into our English Bible. It's translated as kindly or kindness. And I'm going to show you, if you happen to have a copy of God's Word, if you don't, I'll put them here on the screen. I'm going to show you a couple of ways that this word is used in the book of Ruth. Look in chapter 1 and verse 8. It says, "And Naomi said unto her two daughter-in-laws, Go, return each to your mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me." Kindly, that's the word chesed. In chapter 2 and verse 20, it says, "And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead." That's the word kindness. That's chesed. One more time, in chapter 3 and verse 10, it says, And he said, "Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast shown more kindness," that's chesed, "in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich." Now, we understand the word kindness. We understand what it means to be kind or to treat somebody kindly, okay? However, the word chesed goes beyond our normal concept of kindness, and that's really important for us to understand, because we show kindness to a lot of people. We show kindness to complete strangers. We show kindness in all sorts of different ways, but this chesed, when we see kindly or kindness translated, is a different type of kindness. It actually has a covenant concept. It has the idea of a covenant loyalty and a covenant love. It holds with it this unwavering commitment to a person. It's actually used in other places in the Bible to speak of God's steadfast love for Israel. Or there's another place where it's used for God's steadfast love for David. So when we see kind or kindly or kindness, it's more than just what we think about treating somebody nice. It's actually a covenant commitment, this unwavering commitment, this unwavering love that is used there. Another word, when we look at the book of Ruth, that is important for us to understand, and I told you there's going to be a lot of upfront information, but I have questions for you. The next one is this word, glean. The word glean means to gather or to pick up, okay? And again, I'll show you some places where it's used here in the book of Ruth. In chapter 2 and verse 2, it says, "And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace." Let me go pick up some of these ears of corn. Let me go gather some of them together. In chapter 2 and verse 7, "And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." In chapter 2 and verse 15, she says, "And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not." In chapter 2, verses 17 through 19, "So she gleaned in the field until even, and beat out that she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law was with saw what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed. And her mother-in-law said unto her, Where hast thou gleaned today? And where wroughtest thou? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee." And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, "This man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz." Okay? And so we see this word glean or gleaning a lot, to pick up or to gather together. You say, why is this an important word? Well, this word is used 34 times in the Old Testament. And out of those 34 times, 12 of those happen in the book of Ruth. That's 1/3 of all the Old Testament usages of it. 33% of them, at least, happen in this one book. Isaiah uses the same word to describe how God is going to gather his people from among all the nations and restore them to their own land. If you have read much of the Old Testament, we understand that in the law, God had told Israelites not to completely harvest their own fields. Instead, he wanted them to leave some of their field unharvested, or leave some unharvested grain in their field, so that poor people and strangers in the land could gather it up for their own survival. It was like it was charity, basically. Leave some of that there for strangers who are coming through, for poor people who can't provide for themselves right now, to be able to take up some of that and be able to survive. Okay, so the first important one is chesed. The second one is glean. The third one is the idea of this idea here. Hopefully it'll change here for me in just a second. It's not wanting to respond to me. Is the word kinsman, or the idea of a kinsman redeemer. I'm going to see if I can get it to change for me. It's not wanting to change for some reason. We'll see if we can get it to. It's being difficult. Let me see if I can pull it up here. It is just, there we go. Kinsman redeemer. Okay. Kinsman redeemer. Um, we understand a kinsman is just it's a close relative. A kinsman redeemer in biblical times was a close relative who would act as the protector or guardian of the family rights and would oftentimes be called upon to perform a number of different duties. He could buy back property that the family sold. He could provide an heir for a deceased brother by marrying that brother's wife and producing a child with her. He could buy back a family member who had been sold into slavery. They were even allowed to avenge a relative who had been murdered. Now, I say all of these things, and I go through all of these things because I want you to think about, this is important because we're getting to some of these questions now, okay? It's really important. I want you to think about those three things, okay? A steadfast, committed love, the idea of leaving something or leaving some extra behind for others, and the idea of one person redeeming another person. Now, I think, and I could be wrong, this may be easier than I think it is, and maybe more difficult than I think it is. But I want to ask this question. When you think about all of those things I just mentioned, what comes to mind when you think about all of these? These are all pictures of what? Or I even put it this way, of who? Okay? And I want you to answer. I want you to think about this and maybe share some reasons why you give the answer that you do. Okay? So again, this idea of this committed, steadfast, covenant love, the idea of having some extra for others, okay, and the idea of one person redeeming another person. We see all three of these pictures in one place. Where do we see that? And this is not a trick question, okay? I promise you, it's not a trick question. Where do we? What is this a picture of? Where do we see all of these things? Okay, and we're gonna play this out. So the Claytons obviously mentioned, right, and Kristen jumps in here as well. We see this in Jesus, right? So Jesus is both the picture of covenant love. Jesus is the picture of, and this is where the glean comes in, right? Jesus is a picture of redemption for both Jews and Gentiles. I think this is a picture of that all the way back in the Old Testament, that there was going to be some left over for others. This wasn't just for one group of people. This idea of gleaning, we want to leave some behind for other people. And I think this was a picture of redemption that would be not just exclusively for the Jewish people, but for Gentiles as well. By the way, Ruth was a Moabitess woman. She was not a Jew. And so even more so, here is this Jewish man, Boaz, who was leaving some stuff behind, some extra behind for a Gentile to be able to take part in. We also see Jesus as becoming human so that he can be our kinsman, right? He can be he's fully human, but also being our redeemer. He is, as Terry Hart mentioned, Jesus as our near kinsman redeemer. And it's neat because we see all these pictures, all these things that are pointing to the future gospel. We see some of them in this, almost in this mystery, this story of Jesus' steadfast, committed love, so much so that he would send his son to die on the cross. We see this picture of this idea of leaving some behind or having some extra for others. We see this idea of kinsman redeemer, all pictured right here in this book, but pointing to one person who would do all of those things. Now, along with that, we will see in the book of Ruth very clearly how God providentially, okay, and I think this is important, how God providentially guides and blesses all those who trust in him. God will providentially guide and bless all those who trust in him. Now, when I read the book of Ruth, sometimes it almost seems like it could have been written for a Disney movie. See what I mean? Well, all these fairy tales that turn into Disney movies, they start with the line, "Once upon a time," right? Once upon a time. And as you go through the story, there's this great tragedy. There's a damsel in distress. There's Prince Charming who comes to save the day, right? And we actually kind of see pictures of all of these things in the book of Ruth. But notice how verse 1, we're going to jump into the verses now. Notice how verse 1 begins. It says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled." I mean, even the beginning sounds like once upon a time, right? Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. Okay, as it is with most good stories, again, this one's true though. This one begins with, like most good stories do, with a great tragedy. However, often our response to tragedy is oftentimes just as important as the tragedy itself. And what I want us to see beginning tonight and overflowing into next week, I want us to see 3 mistakes that are made here that we want to avoid when hardships or tragedy strike, okay? Because when hardship and tragedy strikes, man, we sometimes our minds just go out the window. And sometimes we'll do things we never imagined that we would do. And our response to tragedy is so important. And again, we'll share one of them tonight, and then we'll overflow it into next week. But really, 3 mistakes that are made here that were so detrimental that we want to look at and we want to avoid tonight when we're dealing with hardship. The very first one, the only one that we're going to look at tonight, is the mistake of unbelief. Unbelief. We're going to see how detrimental, at the beginning of the book of Ruth, unbelief is. Running from your problems. Can I just say that running from your problems is never the solution? Now, let us read verses 1 through 5 together. We're going to set the stage here. And again, I told you we're going to be doing a lot of kind of groundwork laying here, but there are still questions coming, so hang with me, okay? Verses 1 through 5 of Ruth chapter 1. "Now it came to pass in the day when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his two sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died, also both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband." So here we have this story, and it's a great tragedy. We have Elimelech and Naomi, their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and there's a famine that comes to Bethlehem. They leave Bethlehem. They go to Moab. Mahlon and Chilion find these 2 women, Orpah and Ruth. They marry them. However, over time, Elimelech dies, and it makes Naomi a widow. And then Mahlon and Chilion die, and that leaves Orpah and and Ruth as widows as well. And so here we have three women. None of them now have a husband. And if you noticed back in verse 1, I want you to, I'm going to go back to verse 1, what it says, because it's important. We don't want to overlook it. In verse 1, it says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled." Now, this is going to be a real simple question. Again, so don't overthink it here. If the Bible tells us that what's going on here is happening in the days when the judges ruled, and by the way, if you notice the chronology in your Bible, right, it goes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. So I say chronologically, but in the way your books are ordered there. This actually does come after the book of Judges, and I would say it's rightly put there because it's still in the rule of the judges. So again, this is a very simple question. Don't overthink this. If the Bible tells us that what is going on now happens in the days when the judges ruled, then that means Israel had no what? What did Israel lack? What did they not have at this moment? Okay? Again, don't be deceived. This is not a trick question. This is a simple one. It says, in the days when the judges ruled. The judges were ruling. That means Israel did not have what? Again, this is important for us to understand as we lay the groundwork for the book of Ruth. What was, so the Claytons chime in here. They had no king. They had no ruler. There was no king in Israel at this point. And you say, well, why is that so important? Because the Bible tells us in Israel, when there was no king, that every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Okay? And I want to take a time out for just a second. And I want us to notice here in just a minute that there are a lot of comparisons that we can make, a lot of parallels that we can make here to modern day Christianity. As a matter of fact, if you were to take the time and to go back and to read the book of Judges, it may be one of the closest Old Testament parallels to our current time. Because like Israel of the past and like Israel of during the time of the judges, even many of God's people were living in disobedience, and they were living in unbelief, and they were missing out on the blessings of God. Okay? However, here's the encouragement, right? Here's the helpful part for just a second. And I want us to understand this. Even in the most difficult times, and by the way, it was difficult time. There was no king. Even believers were living in unbelief and disobedience. There was a famine in the land. Even in the most difficult of times, you can be assured, and I will say that again, you can be assured that God is writing a beautiful love story. He was doing it in the time of Ruth. He did it in the time of Esther. And he's doing it today. You say, how do you know that? Because I know this much. The Bible tells me that God so loved the world. And I believe this, that God still loves the world. And God still desires for as many as will come to him. And I think it's important for us to understand that now, maybe when we're not in a difficult time, so that when we do get to a difficult time, we do understand that even though things are really hard, and even though things are really difficult, and even though things don't make any sense to me in my mind right now, to understand that even when it doesn't make sense, and I'm sure at this time it didn't make sense to Naomi, it didn't make sense to Orpah, it didn't make sense to Ruth, it didn't make sense to any of them, but God was still writing this beautiful love story. Now, I got another question coming your way. As I just said just a minute ago, the Bible tells us in these first 5 verses, the issue was that there is a famine in the land. These people, Naomi and Elimelech, Mahlon and Chilion, they lived in Bethlehem. And that's where they came from. They came from Bethlehem. But here's the question, right? So for you Bible you Bible trivia people, what does Bethlehem mean? Anybody remember what Bethlehem means? What does Bethlehem mean? Think about it for a second. Should we think hard enough? You'll remember from some time in the past when you've heard it, you've read it, maybe maybe during Christmas it's come to you, you've been reminded of it. What does Bethlehem mean? What's the meaning of that name? Yes, yeah, a couple people are finally chiming in here. Bethlehem means the house of bread. The house of bread. The house of bread is having a famine. How ironic. Not ironic. God was working here. He knew exactly what he was doing. The house of bread was having a famine. The house of bread had no bread. And I believe a lot of that was directly tied to the fact that, again, that people were doing what was right in their own eyes. They were living in disobedience and in unbelief to God, and there were major issues that were going on here in Bethlehem. And so, what do? Well, they decide to leave Bethlehem. They decide to leave the house of bread to go try to find bread somewhere else. And so some people, especially people who provide for their family, husbands who are maybe reading the story, we may think to ourselves, you know what, I would do the same thing Elimelech did. I got to find a way to provide for my family. We may look at this sometimes and go, Pastor, where is the unbelief in what Elimelech did? Well, here's the issue. Elimelech allowed the hardship to control him. Elimelech allowed the hardship to control his decisions. Israel, Bethlehem, was God's place for his people. And it was intended to be God's place of blessing for his people. And Elimelech abandoned that. Another simple way, if you happen to be taking notes, is this, right? Elimelech, walked by sight instead of faith. And by the way, Elimelech's not the first person that did this. Abraham did the same thing in the book of Genesis. And I know we hear this a lot, but I think it's important for me to stop here and say it for just a second. I want you to know that no matter how difficult the circumstances are, there's no better place to be than to be in the will of God. And we have no indication, okay? We have no indication that God told Elimelech to go anywhere. And we've talked about this before, and I think it bears repeating. It's important for us to also remember all of the times the scriptures tell us to wait on the Lord. And really what's happening here? Elimelech is running from the problem. He's running away from the problem to try to go fix it on his own. And it's important for us to understand that in spite of what we see, and in spite of what we feel, and even in spite of what may actually happen, it is imperative for believers to walk by faith and not by sight. So how do I do that? We walk in accordance with the promises of God and in accordance with what His Word says. That's how we walk by faith, even though I don't see it. God named Bethlehem the house of bread. You know why? Because He completely and totally intended to provide that for His people. Elimelech leaves it to go somewhere else. He was walking from a human perspective. He's walking by sight instead of by faith. Secondly, though, and it's important for us to see this as well. He was focusing, or he focused on the physical instead of the spiritual. Because I know when I read this story, and I'm sure many of you out there are doing the same way. Pastor, I probably would have done the same thing Elimelech did. Like, we got to go where the jobs are. We got to go where the food is. I think almost every husband and every father wants to provide for his family. But listen to me clearly. Listen very clearly. While we want to provide for our family, we should never do it at the expense of the blessings of God. I never want to usurp God. As a husband and a father, I want to provide for my family, but not more than I want God to provide for my family. And I mean, think about this for a second. One of Satan's temptations to Jesus was, hey, go ahead and satisfy your hunger. I know you're hungry. And he was saying, hey, you filling your belly is more important than you honoring or pleasing the Father. I know you're hungry. Go ahead and eat. Well, Pastor, they have to live. What are they supposed to do? Well, I want to share two scripture verses with you really quickly. First of all, Acts chapter 17, verse 18 says, "For in him," who? In Jesus, "we live and move and have our being." As certain, also Paul says, as certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. For in him we live and move and have our being. He said, what are you supposed to do? Trust the Lord with my life. Let me share this verse with you as well. Psalm chapter 37 and verse 25. I think it's a very important verse. As a matter of fact, if there's one verse I remember our pastor in North Carolina, Brother Mike, reiterating to us often over and over again. He says, I've been young, and now I'm old. Yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. Never seen. I've not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. He focused, though, so importantly on the physical that he actually forsook the spiritual. The idea of faith, but also the idea, we'll see here in just a minute, that he takes his family to, of all places, Moab. And I don't have time tonight to go into all the details of Moab, but let's, as we look at this next point, he honored the enemy instead of honoring the Lord. Elimelech chose to abandon God's land and abandon God's people for the land and the people of the enemy. The Moabites, by the way, and I don't mean to get gross or get into the details, but the Moabites are the descendants of an incestuous relationship between Lot and one of his daughters. Plain and simple. And for many years, they actually held Israel captive. They were thorns in their side. They were enemies at war for quite some time. On the flip side, interesting enough, Elimelech, and let me ask this, maybe I'm going to ask this question, I don't have it written out here, but maybe somebody knows the answer to this. Does anybody know what the name Elimelech means? Does anybody know what the name Elimelech means? I'll give you a minute to think about that one, to maybe write out an answer if you want to. This was not in my questions. I admit, this is a little bit harder of a question. You might have to go look it up and see for yourself. So I won't wait too long. But the name Elimelech. I'll give it just a little bit of time, and somebody may still end up getting it. And I don't have it again. I don't have my notes. This is what I'm planning on asking this question. But the name Elimelech means, my God is king. That's what Elimelech means. Elimelech means, my God is king. But in this instance, and in this decision, God was not king. God was left out of Elimelech's decision. His sons then marry Moabite women. And by the way, let me just stop there. So there you go. That's where I got it. My God is king. Good job. And I think it's important for us to stop there. Notice the effect that one decision has. Elimelech goes, oh, there's a famine. I need to feed my family. And so he goes to Moab, and now his sons marry Moabite women. And then there's potential to have children, and then how are we going to raise these children? Again, it's this idea of being unequally yoked together, and how are we going to raise these children, and what gods are they going to serve? And I think it's important for us to also notice, as we look at these verses tonight, look in verse 1. And notice it says, now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He intended, the Bible tells us, to sojourn. I'm just going to go there for a little bit and then come back. But notice what verse 4 says. It says, and they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. They had gone there. They were just going to go. We're going to come right back, God. God, I know this is an act of unbelief, but God, I'll be right back. I'm going to come right back. 10 years later, they're still in Moab. When you think about this for a second, they left Bethlehem to go to Moab to escape death. Let's just put it out there. If we stay here in Bethlehem, we're not going to have any food and we're going to die. And they go to Moab, and not to be mean or ugly about it, but they go to Moab and they die just the same. In a very few short verses, all we have left are 3 widows. That's it. Everything else was gone. And I want to stop here and say, such is the effect of unbelief. This is the effect of unbelief. And when we are faced with a difficult situation, we must avoid making it worse by an unbelieving, disobedient heart. Now, as we start wrapping this all up and bring it to a conclusion, I want to end on this point because I know it sounds so harsh, right? This idea of unbelief and how Elimelech's decision making. This isn't the primary point of the book of Ruth. As I mentioned before, while there was decisions that were made that were detrimental, that were fueled by disobedience and unbelief, remember I told you one of the main points of the book of Ruth is this: that God will providentially guide and bless all those who trust in Him. I believe that with all my heart. And that's the message I want to leave you with tonight. That even in the most difficult of situations, and we will see it play out in the book of Ruth as we continue to go through it, God will providentially guide and bless all those who trust in Him. And it's been a while since I've said it, but if that's true, and I believe it to be true, and if that's true, and I hope you believe it to be true, then my closing sentiments to this Wednesday Night Live are still the same. And that is to keep looking up. When things get difficult, when things get hard, don't look around for a way out. Don't look down in unbelief. Keep looking up. Why? Because God will providentially guide and bless all those who trust in Him. Now, I want to say thank you for sticking with me tonight as we introduce the book of Ruth. This was not our normal Wednesday night. There's usually much more back and forth. There's usually much more questions, and I look forward to getting back into that. But I wanted to and needed to kind of get some of this groundwork laid out here and then jump into the first couple verses of the book of Ruth just to dip our toes into it. It's got, I think, maybe, I can't remember now, 4, 5, 6, I want to say 4 chapters, but it might be more than that. It might be 7. I can't remember. I want to say 4 chapters. And look forward to going through those 4 chapters with you in the coming weeks. And we'll just take it little by little. Probably won't be chapter after chapter. We'll just take kind of section by section. And hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And I want to say thank you guys for joining us as we jump into the book of Ruth. And Lord willing, we'll see you guys on Sunday. Look forward to it. 4th of July, but also the Lord's Day, an opportunity to worship Him. And so hope you have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you all later. Have a good night.